Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 9th edition of the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I am your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. And if you're a parent like me, you are probably experiencing all the joys and wonder of virtual learning at home. And, I feel for every parent who's going through that. It's not easy. It's also not easy for the teachers. And there's a lot of controversy around virtual learning, whether or not that is going to be the best option for our students long term. And today we have two parents who are advocating an in-person learning option for their students. They are Beth Getz and Kimberly Graves. How are y'all today?
Doing great, thanks.
Good, Dan. How are you?
Doing awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Wednesday is actually our day off from school. We go Monday, Tuesday virtual. Wednesday is kind of our catch-up homework day, and then we do Thursday, Friday. So Wednesdays are always like, I can run around the house and be a little free. Our other guests today are our usual guests, George Cheedy and Hans Utz. How are y'all doing today?
I'm good.
Yeah.
He's driving, so don't ask him many questions.
Yeah, George is trying to get a suit, I guess. He's driving around and twitching, so good luck with that.
I should be holding the phone up. I'm going to get pulled over, and then this will be a much more interesting.
I'm going to see this video in a courtroom setting someday, and I'm not ready for it.
Yeah.
So, Kim and Beth, talk to me a little bit about what y'all are up to with you. You've got a Facebook group. I don't think the group has a name exactly, but you've got several hundred people in it. There was some talk of having a protest of sorts. I don't know if that ever came to fruition, but
Not a
talk,
protest.
or demonstration, or
Rally.
whatever you want to call it.
Rally.
A group of people
Peaceful
with
protest.
signs. Right. So talk to me a little bit about what your group is and what you're advocating for and kind of what you've been up to up until this point with this discussion.
Sure. Sorry, my lighting just went crazy here, so I look like I'm striped. But anyway, so it does have a name. It's DCSD, Parents Who Want an In-Person Learning Option. Nice short name we found.
Needs a little work.
Really, the purpose of the group was to give parents in DeKalb County a place for collective voice to discuss positive action to advocate an option for our children to have an in-person learning. It's not designed to debate if we should or we shouldn't have it. It was really about we are parents who want this, and we're not in favor of this at the expense of saying it's the only option, but it's an option that we want on the table. So the group has grown tremendously. We started with like 120 members before virtual learning started. And within a week of virtual learning, I was getting bombarded with requests, and we're now at about 730 members. I have had to decline a lot that I didn't feel answered the questions because we're trying to keep it positive. We're not looking for arguments and negativity, which you see all over Facebook these days. And we were working on planning a rally with Labor Day and things that kind of got pushed back. And then we decided we were going to wait and see what happened at this September 14th Board of Education meeting and go from there. But really, we've been focusing on collectively gathering facts and figures and data. We're aligned with many of the other groups, Fulton, Cobb, Gwinnett, learning what they're doing, sharing information within our groups. And I was inspired by what was happening in Cobb County to start this group. And we've just grown tremendously because I think a lot of parents are feeling that same level of frustration with virtual learning and wanting some options. So there's the long-winded answer of.
Well, I definitely feel you on the frustration, and as fate would have it, right before, and for the record, I did invite DeKalb County school officials to join us. I invited Marshall Orson, who's the school board chair, I believe, to join us. Both of which declined. I do have a comment from Marshall I will read a little later. But as fate would have it, the county schools sent out a reopening survey to everyone, like literally just an hour before this. And in full disclosure, I took the survey. I indicated a preference. If there's an option, the way I look at the situation is this: if there is an option for my child to go, he's gonna go. That is something we've talked about a lot. But we also recognize that this isn't just us. This is a community decision that is being made here. Kim, I just wanted to see if you wanted to add anything to what Beth was saying about your group and kind of what your group is all about and what you've been up to.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just to add on there, I mean, it's a lot more about data and what data is the school system following? What numbers are they looking at? How are other metro Atlanta counties able to be back in school? And in the grand scheme of things, relatively safely. And why is DeKalb, hesitant to give us a choice? Because as Beth said, that's what we want, is a choice. We don't think it's a one size fits all. Certainly there's going to be people that don't feel comfortable. There's going to be teachers that don't feel comfortable. And I think we all get that. But at the same time, we've got kids at home. We have their friends. We have other people in the community that are like, this is a train wreck. I mean, our kids are not learning anything and they're frustrated. And, there's a level of stress in our house that I'm sure we can all identify with, because, these kids have been home now for 6 months. I mean, they've been out of school. They've not been in a school building in over 180 days. That's the length of a school year. So, and it's funny, how kids, when they're in school, they're like, oh, I don't want to get up and go to school. My kids would do anything to be able to go to school. And I have 2 high schoolers. So I think, sorry, Beth, go ahead.
I was to say, and for the record, I have 3 kids. I have one in private school in 6th grade, and then I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader. So my 3rd and 5th grader every day see my 6th grader going to school. And if I could afford to just pull my kids out and put them all in private school, I would do it in a heartbeat. But that's not really an option right now. And so I think of all of the families who are in similar or worse situations where their home situation is really not good, and what's happening to those poor kids who are at home.
Yeah, there are a lot of needs. I will say, on the virtual learning side of it, I know it has not gone smoothly for everyone. We're a DeKalb County family, and I just want to give a shout out to my kid's teacher. She's rocking it. I mean, she is doing a really phenomenal job under some pretty terrible circumstances.
I concur with you on that.
Yeah.
My kids' teachers are doing an amazing job, and I know they are. I mean, I've talked to my 5th grader's teacher. She lives in my neighborhood. She's been teaching for 23 years, and she said she's never worked harder.
Yeah.
And I see it. I mean,
the specials are a totally
Nobody was
different
trained
story.
for
We have
this, right?
the specials are art, music or whatever. That stuff in the afternoon, that's a mess. No, I mean that's definitely been a pain. But so Hans, did you want to ask a question? I think you were talking. I might have cut you off.
Oh, I was just making the observation that no teacher teaching today has been trained for this particular scenario, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't think it's fair to say that we're expecting them. I think there probably are some parents that are being unreasonable about expectations. But in general, I think we're being very forgiving of the difficulty that the teachers are facing, because nobody was taught how to do this. Hell, Zoom hasn't even, they've had to change all of their code to be able to make this actually work. So, I don't view any advocacy like what you're doing in any way as a criticism of the actual teaching that the teachers are doing. I mean, we're all doing the best that we possibly can in a set of really awful circumstances.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I think you see that the teachers who are technically savvy some of the younger teachers or the ones who've implemented technology in a normal setting at a higher level, I see that those teachers are having an easier time than some of the more old school teachers who are not as up to date with their technological skills. So I think it's been a challenge for them.
So we do have some questions pouring in. I want to acknowledge those questions and tell y'all we're going to get to those. We've probably got more questions for this than we've had for the last 5 or 6 shows. I do want to talk really quickly about the numbers that we're working with, because I went before the show just to try to get a sense of what is DeKalb even looking at to make these decisions. What in God's name, George?
George.
Hey, sorry, I'm home.
Okay. Your dog is glad to see
I'm
you.
also, my cell phone's about to die, so I'm going to have to step off.
All right. Drop out and join back when you get a second.
All right, I will.
Thank you. Good Lord. Okay. So DeKalb Schools has this decision tree, and it says substantial spread, minimal spread, moderate spread, minimal, moderate, low to no spread. It doesn't say exactly what that is. It doesn't define that in any way. And it says level of community spread as determined by state and local health officials. So I went to the county health board, and the county health board said, we are in no way involved in any decision to reopen schools. And I was like, well, you might want to tell the county schools that, because they think you are. So you've got this sort of, not that this confusion is uncommon in any way. I mean, it's kind of been the running theme of the whole COVID thing. So that's kind of where, we're at from the school level. I'm not getting a whole lot of direction from them about what they're looking at. They're going to have a meeting on the 14th where they're presumably going to give us some sense of that. So today's DeKalb County cases are, we have 17,000. DeKalb County is still within the top 5 within the state for cases. The next one below us is Hall County. It should not be a shocker. DeKalb is basically Atlanta. So we have 17,237 cases. We have 324 deaths. Yesterday, we had 17,169 cases and 318 deaths. So it seems to me like there has been a bit of an uptick. I'm looking at the percent change day to day. It looked like it had kind of.
And the data does lag 2 weeks.
Sure, the data lags, and exactly. And so we unfortunately are not going to know for some time how many people acted like idiots on Labor Day until we see some of these tests come in. Another thing that bothers me about this discussion is I know a lot of people aren't getting tests now. There was a point where everyone was like, go get your test, it's free. But then it became, I'm the same way. I'm like, if it's a pain in the ass, it's going to take me 2 weeks to get my result, what good is the test? Because
what about the people who tested positive and then they have to go back and get a second test, and we don't know what they're counting? Like, the numbers are very
That's a good question. I don't know. So
let me engage on the data for just a sec. I've been very patient about the data.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Let me engage on the data, right? So first of all, you're counting cumulative tests or cumulative cases within DeKalb, like since March or whenever the counting started. So the more relevant information would be how many active cases do we currently have? And what is the trend on those active cases? And what are the populations in which those active cases are prevalent, right? And some of that is not known at the moment. What we do know, what I think we can all safely say is the trend looks good. The case numbers are coming down. Labor Day notwithstanding, right? So we do probably have a 2-week window of time before we're going to start having clarity on what happened on Labor Day. What I can also say is, given the way that Memorial Day and 4th of July both happened, we're going to see an uptick post Labor Day. It's just going to happen, right? The question is it as bad of an uptick? Because now mostly people are wearing masks. Mostly people have kind of like institutionalized the process that they need to do to try to stay as safe as possible. But we're going to see an uptick coming out of Labor Day, I think, without question.
And
The-
can I just speak to the data too? Because that's my jam. That's what I'm all about, is the data. And the problem is that we have flawed data at best. I mean, we don't know how many deaths had comorbidities, how many deaths were advanced age. We don't know, how many tests were actually positive. I mean, I just read an article before we started this meeting that Boston had over 400 tests that were false positives that were included in their numbers, and this was just one lab. So there's all of that, and then
so I'm going to interrupt you right now. I'm sorry, but I'm going to interrupt you right now. On the data, a lot of the stuff that you're throwing out right now is actual smokescreen. Let's stay with real data. We know deaths above normal. The number of deaths that happen every year in any population is startlingly stable. And we are this year experiencing a shockingly high number of deaths above normal. So comorbidities, that's a big word, irrelevant. There is a significant number of population. There is a significant.
Hans, please let her respond.
It's in no way irrelevant, because for all intents and purposes, COVID is a virus akin to the common cold with symptoms very similar to the flu. So when you look at flu symptoms side by side with COVID symptoms, when you look at methods of transmission, when you look at all of it, they're almost identical. So most people who would die from the flu probably died from COVID or with.
So why do we have 200,000 deaths above normal this year and counting? And I don't even talk about the 185,000 confirmed deaths due to COVID, which, as you say, potentially are due to other comorbidities. Every year we have a seasonal flu.
They are due to
hold on, let me finish. I let you just finish. Every year we have a seasonal flu, and every year there is an average number of deaths. We know roughly the annual death rate for everything, whether it's flu, whether it's cancer, anything else. We know roughly how many people are going to die every year, plus or minus a pretty tight band. Every once in a while, we have a particularly bad flu, which instead of killing 40,000 people, kills 70,000 people. But those are the kind of numbers that we're talking about in terms of variation. It's highly consistent. And this year, before we're even done with August, we're 200,000 deaths above that. That is COVID. There's nothing else that's doing
200,000. I've not heard.
COVID.
Okay. But you understand that the CDC announced that 94% of those deaths were people over 65 years old and or had underlying conditions. It's all
that I don't disagree with that data at all. I mean,
okay.
That's actually probably totally correct. This is killing old
so
people,
then you're talking about around 6,000 people who actually died of COVID.
Not at all. No, 200,000 deaths have happened that would not have normally happened had COVID not been in the population.
And I don't agree, because
but that's a fact. I mean, it doesn't matter if you agree. That is data. That is an irreducible number.
Data. Hospitals receive $30,000+ for every COVID case that they report.
These are not COVID deaths. I'm not arguing that these are deaths labeled COVID. That's not what I'm arguing.
Okay, but you're attributing 200,000 people.
I am not attributing
200,000 deaths to COVID.
Yes, I am saying that in this year, at this point, over an average year, of which we have decades of highly stable data, ignore COVID. I don't care if it's COVID. I don't care what it is. This year, by August, 200,000 people have died that would not normally have in a year. That's the data. That is an irreducible number. And the reason I'm going to say now as a hypothesis, but it is one of those theories that is virtually proven, is due to COVID. That is what this disease is doing. So I'm with you on a lot of what we're advocating, right? I have a special needs child at home. This is murder. And I am totally supportive of some of the positions that you guys want to take about giving people options. But we're not going to do it by arguing fact. The data is crystal clear on where we are. This is a dangerous disease.
It's not crystal clear to me. It's as crystal
but
clear
that, I
as
mean,
water.
I can explain it to
the
you,
narrative
but I can't understand it for you, I think is probably the core way to describe that.
I can't understand your logic for you.
It's not logic. I mean, I'm just giving you the numbers. 200,000 people have died this year that would not have normally died.
I think we have covered this pretty well. So I'm gonna move this one along. I do appreciate both of your perspectives on it. Before we get to these questions, I want to ask Beth and Kim, what is too much for you to send your kids to school? Like what number would make you go? What data point would make you go, hey, we can't do in-person school? What is the threshold? I want to find out your personal comfort level with that, where you would say, no, we can't do in-person learning. I just kind of want to know where that is for each of you.
I don't have a number in mind. I think these kids were pulled out of school way too early. And I think that they've been keeping them out of school way too long. I have one child going to school. They started going half days, and they have done an amazing job. They're now at full days, 5 days a week. And they have not had issues, knock on wood. And I've been really pleased with what they're doing. So I'm ready to send my kids back. Even if there's an uptick, I'm not fearful. I don't watch the news all day and live in fear. I feel like we may have had it already. We didn't know. My kids were pretty sick early in March. My husband had been in Amsterdam. I don't know, but I'm ready for life to go on. And as Kim was saying before we got on, we have to hit herd immunity. I'm not getting a vaccine. My family won't be getting a vaccine. We take care of our health. We eat healthy. We exercise. We do everything we can to keep our family healthy. So we're ready. I'm ready to go back.
The estimate of American deaths to hit herd immunity is about 4.2 million people. That's okay with you? I mean, I just want to be clear. That's okay. Like, I'm surprised that that's okay. And now before we get into another argument, because I'm really truly not trying to go down that path. I agree that this is not particularly dangerous for kids, right? I mean, I think that the data bears that out. Now, having said that, it is actually dangerous for some kids. There are some kids that are going to die of COVID, and some kids that have died of COVID having caught it. And that makes me uncomfortable, but I recognize it isn't outside of what typically happens with the flu or RSV or other particular respiratory diseases. What does make me uncomfortable, and I'm curious your response to it, what does make me uncomfortable is the fact that this is particularly bad for elderly and other individuals. And the sacrifices that we're generally making right now as a community, and they are enormous, awful sacrifices. I'm not trying to play that down. But in general, we're trying to take those sacrifices to protect the people who are dying of it. And what worries me about herd immunity is that like 4.2 million of them roughly are going to have to die of it in order for us to get to that 70% or whatever that threshold is that we have to hit to in terms of herd immunity. And so what do you say to the elderly or the people that are at risk if this continues to get transmitted? And oh, I'm sorry, let me just add in there, because I don't necessarily think going back to school automatically means being transmitted. I mean, I think there are steps that can be taken to make it safer for people. So let's assume that. But
so what do you
the individuals at risk,
you think everybody should just sit at home and life stops forever? I mean, like,
Well,
what?
I do think that had we as an entire group, like the whole state of Georgia or the country, had we truly knuckled down for 6 weeks, which is more or less actually what happened in Spain, which is what happened in Italy, what happened in New York, what happened in some of these other places, you knuckle down for 2 months and it's awful. It is awful. It's a cratering of everything. But after 2 months, New York is below 1% population spread, right? Spain has basically got it beat. There's another uptick coming up right now, but nothing. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of cases, not thousands of deaths per day like where we are. So yeah, I do actually think if we knuckled down for a month or two, you see a big difference. And we never really have. And so we're okay with 4.2 million deaths.
How can you say we haven't locked down? I mean,
we haven't locked down. We don't have a mask mandate in this state. We're still out. I mean, we didn't close bars and restaurants.
Thank God we're still out. Thank God we're not living in California. Or I have a brother that lives in California, and what they're doing, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to government totally controlling my life. It's not
at the expense of 4.2 million deaths, I guess. I mean, so that's the difference, right? I mean, that's the fundamental difference is you're okay with 5 million dead people, and I'm not.
How many cases of all of these that are being counted are in the hospital? How many times was our hospital system overwhelmed? Is it overwhelmed now? It was never overwhelmed.
Those are good questions. I mean, so I'll concede those are.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Hold on, because you were talking, and I actually never even did answer Dan's question, which was, when am I going to feel comfortable? I'm comfortable. I've never not been comfortable with my children going to school, because you know what? The 100,000+ kids in DeKalb County, out of those kids, over 75% of those kids rely on schools to eat. That's probably a safe place for them. That's probably the only respite that they get from their abusive home or their drug addicted mother or father or whatever. So
I'm with you until we start.
No, they don't.
I actually like the arguments that you're making right now are solid arguments to hit me into your column. I think that's a great set of arguments. I think that is where we focus. How do we ensure that like the object here, and I'm going to say this, I think, for everyone sitting around the table, right? The object that we all agree on is to arrive at a solution that is best for the kids, that is best for the community,
and that's
best for everybody.
The conversation, by the way.
I totally agree with that. Well, but sometimes options aren't necessarily what's best. I think that's where we disagree. But let's just say, like, start from the perspective of, you're 100% right. There are kids that rely on those school lunch programs. There are kids that not just abusive or drug-addled moms, which I think starts playing into some silly stereotypes. But I mean, like, I'm not a drug-addled dad, and I freaking desperately need to get my special needs kids into a classroom with some structure. Like, it's necessary. That is crucial. So if we're starting from what are the costs of what we're doing now versus what are the benefits of what we're doing now, and as long as we're actually talking about the impact, right? I mean, that if we're going to start questioning whether people are dying of COVID, you're going to lose me again. But there is a break point, and I'm with you, that at some point you do have to start asking the question, is it worse for the kids to be out of school, or is it better for the kids to be into school? And that's where you can start having some policy conversations around how to achieve it that don't increase the harm to the overall community.
And we'll wrap that up and let Kim and Beth respond real quick, and then we will get to some questions. I promise. We have a lot of questions pouring in.
I mean, I'm an essential worker. I've never stopped working this entire time because I am part of an essential business. And by the grace of God, I'm still sitting here, and I've never gotten sick. And I only wear a mask when I have to. But I think, certainly following the safety protocol, washing hands, doing the common sense things that we should all be doing anyway, there's no reason that we can't safely give these kids a choice to go back to school. The CDC lumps together pneumonia, influenza, and COVID. Those are all what that number makes up. You can go to cdc.gov and see those numbers for yourself. The numbers and the cases that you see, that's what they're comprised of, okay? So people need to educate themselves on what these numbers mean, because these are not—
I couldn't agree with you more on that point. I would start with you, but yes, I agree with you on that.
I have educated myself ad nauseum. Okay, I have a
emphasis
full-time
on the
job and I have
nauseum.
2 kids, and I have done more trying to get these children back in school than I've almost done with my full-time job, and I don't even get paid to do so because I feel that passionately about it. Because these kids are suffering. You even said it yourself. It's hell for you. So, I mean, we're not stepping over bodies in the street, and we never have been. I am not making light of these deaths and however many.
But you are, hold on, you are, if you're air quoting, if you're like cases,
yes,
cases,
right, because
and they're lumping all these other diseases together. COVID has killed 200,000 people in this country.
Yes.
Full stop. You can
Along
argue
with
that
pneumonia,
point, and it's
along
a
with
fact.
influenza, they're all the same number. Go to cdc.gov.
You're not correct. You are incorrect.
Then
that is a falsehood that you are propagating. Now, if you're going to propagate falsehoods, there's not a lot to talk about. We're just going to yell at each other.
So
but the fact of the matter
is lying. Is that what you're saying? Because I mean, that's
no, they're not lying. You're not understanding the data.
Oh, I absolutely understand.
200,000 people have died of COVID in this country. 200,000 people have died of COVID in this country.
Says you.
To hit herd immunity, 4.2 million will have to die. If you're dismissive of the fact,
down and they hit herd immunity, how would you explain that?
How would I say that again?
Sweden. How would you explain what happened there?
Say that. Sorry. Sweden. How would you mean Sweden, the country that rethought what they did because they had such a high death rate? They had the highest death rate in Europe.
Sweden didn't
for
go
6
so well.
Weeks straight. Like, holy crap! Let's go ahead and talk about these countries.
All right. I'm gonna bring all this to a pause. We got questions. From readers. I appreciate the spirited debate. Let's go through them. We got a lot of questions. Comment from Stout327: if we reopen, cases will increase and spread the virus further in the community. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by reopen. But certainly any movement of people during a pandemic, I think, is going to cause some level of community spread. There's no doubt about that. Stout says, I feel that letting much...
Status?
Say what?
I thought we were out of pandemic status.
I have no idea about
for weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. So I mean, I guess what are we talking about in terms of definitions? Free community spread. We definitely still have that.
Yeah.
But what defines a pandemic? Where we haven't been in those numbers for a long time.
Well, we're where we are right now in terms of new cases per day is similar to where we were when we shut down in April. Now we're coming down rather than going up, which is a good thing. But without question, we still are having new cases per day at high rates. I am more interested in the trend line, which looks like it's going in the right direction, which is why this is a conversation that I think is worth starting to have. But I don't think anyone's really defined what constitutes a pandemic other than the fact that whatever we were doing 8 weeks ago was clearly a pandemic.
And there's definitely
the only country besides China who literally tests everyone. Up until a couple of weeks ago, the CDC was allowing anyone and everyone to get tested. Well, guess what? You're then looking for cases. So how many of those cases, like I said before, are in the hospital, are in ICUs, are, sick at home, in bed, incapacitated? Very, very few. So 93 million
our test rates
to date.
Though,
we've done 93 million tests in the United States.
Kim, respectfully, this conversation would go a lot better if you would start acting like you have some basic compassion for people. That's
I totally do.
okay. Well,
I have compassion
you
for
air
these
quoting deaths and whatnot ain't helping. So if you want to come from a point of having compassion for what people are dealing with, we can have a conversation. But a lot of this stuff is really getting under my skin.
It's life
So
and death.
yeah, I mean my wife has asthma. This ain't a joke. Sending
heart
her.
conditions. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, this ain't a joke for
conditions.
people. Like, our decision when we filled out that survey about going to school and whether we would do it or not, that was a conversation we had to have as a family because there's more than one person who's affected by that. And I think that's the larger point of this discussion is you and Beth want that option. I do too, but we're only one side of that conversation. There are other people that have to be a part of it too, because
Sure, and
we
Dan,
can't unilaterally say do this.
And to your point, when it comes to compassion, the whole argument that we have put forward is, like I said in the beginning, not to eliminate the option for those who have health concerns, who have grandparents that live in their house that are high risk, who have family members that are at high risk. Those people should have every single reason and right and capability of having the best virtual experience possible. Okay? So that has never been said that shouldn't exist. The conversation is around those who feel comfortable, those who are not concerned about their own situation from a health perspective because they feel okay with what's going on, that they would like to have an option to send their children to school. I have talked to plenty of teachers who also would like to be at school. Meanwhile, there are plenty of teachers who don't want to be at school. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have that option for a decision. So please understand that this is not about a lack of compassion for people and their own situation. This is for having an option, like we see all these other counties around us presenting options, right? They have plans to go back. They're taking it slow. They're evaluating, but they have an option.
Right. Just stop putting cases and deaths in air quote, and you'll be fine with me. That would be great. We got other questions. How are teachers supposed to manage doing both in-person and virtual learning? Which is a great question because I do have a friend who is in Fulton, and I believe Fulton is doing sort of a hybrid model there where there's an option for kids to be at home, and there's an option for kids to be in the class. But in actuality, that means teachers are working their butts off. They're basically having to do double the work to do both. They're having to prepare for in-person and prepare for at home. Is my understanding.
I have a friend who teaches high school in Gwinnett, and she does have students that are virtual in her classroom and students that are in the classroom. And she did say the first few days it was a little bit awkward and kind of clunky, but she's getting into a rhythm and finding a way. Same in my daughter who is in school, they do give children the option for virtual, and they have cameras in the room so that those children can be part of the classroom, so to speak.
Just spitballing here, but if there are teachers that are comfortable going back, wouldn't it? I mean, is there a way to explore teachers that are comfortable being back with students that are comfortable being back, being in person, and teachers that want to be virtual with the students? I'm sure there's operational complexities associated with that I'm not thinking of. That I'm sure any school administrator is probably heart palpitations. But I mean, I think there are creative ways to explore how this might be done.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement there. I don't think there's anybody in this group.
Oh, we found something we all agree on.
Yeah. Well, we all agree it's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's
That is
anybody who has a child right now. I mean, it's a pain in the ass.
Actually, you know what? There are some parents I know that are loving this. They have multiple children. They're not rushing out the door every day.
Well, I want whatever they're on because
Yeah.
I don't have that. Question about your group. Does your group reflect the diversity of DeKalb County Schools? I don't know the answer to that.
That's a great question. So, we have not been exclusive by any means, except for, have you answered the questions to get into the group? But I started the group with somebody else that we know. We have, it's not a hidden group or anything. Anyone's welcome to join. So, we have been growing in numbers and diversity. So would I say we have as many members in our group as we would like to from other parts of the county? We don't, but I don't necessarily know people or don't have a way of, I'm not out there promoting the group. Let's just say that. People have been coming to join the group, but I'm not out there. I mean, I have a full-time job, 3 children, I'm homeschooling too. I'm not out there actively promoting the group. The group was created as a place to bring people together to discuss and share information, but we're not out there like lobbying and, there's limitations to the group, that's for sure.
Well, it's grown by 700% in 5 weeks or something. I mean, we had 120 members and now we have over, I don't know, almost
750.
But would you say that's mostly white parents? Is it white and black parents, white and Hispanic? I mean, what do you...
it's a definite mix.
There's a mix for sure.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, this falls on, in many ways, the impact of having kids at home and virtual learning is much harder on a single mother or families that hourly workers or people, and so this does not evenly hit on the socioeconomic spectrum, right? This is absolutely much harder on parents that are economically challenged, and that's part of, I think, rather than argue about the facts of COVID, I think arguing about the impacts on individual people is a much better way to to bring people along in a conversation about this.
Totally.
And you bring up a really good point, because I know we had so many technology issues. We had gotten the DeKalb County Chromebooks and it was a hot mess. My children are using other devices. We happen to have other devices in our home, but what about the families that don't? And the sound quality is so bad on the Zoom calls, you can't learn, or they don't have someone sitting beside them when they get frustrated or they can't log in to keep them going, where they just shut their computer and they call it a day.
Right. And you've touched on a point that definitely worries me. One of the things that worries me the most, my son's in a kindergarten class, and I had a conversation. I actually got to meet my son's teacher. We were doing a drop-off where they handed us the workbooks, and we got to talk through the driver's window. And I asked her, how many kids are in this class? And she said 11. And I said, how many kids are usually in the class? She said 25. So where the hell those other kids go? Either they couldn't get on, they're homeschooling, or something else. So I hope somebody's tracking that, because that'll be a data point we'll be discussing for a long time. But when DeKalb County handed out the Chromebooks, they didn't even hand them out to the K through second students. They didn't have enough. They said K through second, you're on your own until we get some Chromebooks. And that was pretty much it.
Even if they were infinitely resourced, even if money wasn't an issue, they would not have been able to get the Chromebooks. We happened to be in the middle of a move, so we didn't have internet set up when we moved. City Schools at Decatur was offering, T-Mobile or some kind of hotspots for people that needed to have internet access. And so we applied for one of them, and we found out that of the 2,000 units that they ordered to help their population of students get through this, they'd had 5 delivered.
Oh, God.
And everything was on a 6-month backlog, because every school system in the country ordered 10,000 hotspots to try to help the students that needed it.
Right.
We took our names off that list because we can afford to get
there's
cable,
definitely a supply chain issue there. I found that out trying to buy a webcam for this Twitch show.
What I worry about, honestly, is the long-term implications of this that we won't see for years and years down the road, because kids are not getting educated And Georgia public schools, when you look at Georgia around the whole country, we are not great. We are not doing great. Okay. And so we are now going to drop down even further. The longer our kids are not having access to in-person schooling, the harder it is going to be to catch back up. And so we may not see it now. It may seem like it's going okay. Our kids are learning. But what I really worry about is down the road, what does this all mean for our kids?
Well, I mean,
let me reframe that slightly if I could, right? Because I think more or less most states are dealing with this right now, and most states are having, like the argument could be made that on average across the country, all kids are dealing with this sort of disruption, so everybody is going to be on average on the same playing field coming out of it. But the on average bugs me out of that statement, because I know that I can afford to get my kids the instruction necessary to get them forward. And I know, I'm suspecting, I can't speak for you guys, but I'm suspecting that you probably can as well. That is not the case for the 14 kids that dropped out of Dan's son's kindergarten class, right? So again, this comes out into an equity conversation about how it disproportionately disadvantages some people in a way that does push them behind. I don't know whether averaged across the state, it means that Georgia's going to fall even further down. I mean, like Mississippi has one of the higher case counts per day right now. They're certainly not in a position to argue that they're particularly strong on education either.
They're back in school.
Huh?
They're all back in school.
They need to be to catch up to Georgia, right? I mean, that's like just going to all my friends from Mississippi, just put that little dig in there. But I mean, the reality is I don't know that it necessarily shows up on an average basis across states. This is going to show up at an income level difference, and any of the separation that we are trying to close through equity is going to be greatly damaged with this.
So I kind of equate this whole thing to like an onion, that we're peeling back the layers, and I think that's where my passion and my drive comes from with this whole thing. And let me say too, when I'm doing air quotes for cases, I'm just saying cases. I'm not meaning that they're not real, or that the virus is not real, or that this isn't real. That's not what I mean at all. But my legitimate, as a mother, as a human being, concern is for the mental health of these children, for the social health of these children, for, as Beth said, and we all kind of agreed, for the long-term implications on these children, not to mention, the implications on the adults who are losing jobs, or who, can't pay their bills. I mean, it's like a mushroom cloud. And so I think that, again, that's where my passion comes from. And it's not even, yes, I want my children to be back in school, but it's these children who, these 74% of these children who rely on schools for meals, and who, I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm assuming that maybe if that's the case with these children, they may not have the means to have the technology needed to, to do virtual learning. And so what's happening to these children,
Right.
And honest to God, like, that keeps me up at night. I worry. I'm like, are they in abusive homes? Are they, being fed? Are they,
And I would argue that it also probably keeps our school district officials up at night as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the other side of it. I don't think that they are making these decisions willy-nilly. I really do think that they take that into account. I do want to go ahead and run through the rest of these questions, y'all, if you'll just bear with me, because we have a lot. Alex said she got a test in 2 days. That's awesome. DeKalb is getting a much better test turnaround. That's also great. Are you, a reader asks, are you and Beth skeptical that COVID is a big deal, quote unquote?
No, I have had a family member die from COVID. Now, he was older and had other things, so they labeled him as COVID death, but that's a whole different topic. My aunt and uncle were both in the hospital in Long Island with COVID. So no, I do not minimize that this is a real thing and that many people have died from this. But I think when you start looking at the numbers around children and look from that perspective, we have to be realistic about where the numbers fall in there and what is the right thing for the kids.
So, a few more questions, just some comments. Alex Brown says, I completely disagree. There are plenty of people who died from COVID who would not have died from the flu. I'm going to say yes. I'm not an expert on that. There are definitely long-term, funny that Hans is in this conversation because Hans actually tested positive for COVID a few months ago. And, one of the things that's coming out about COVID is that there are these long-term effects of it that reverberate for a while. And I believe, Hans, you've been dealing with some of that. Am I correct, or am I?
Yeah, although I need to be very clear that the people that have truly chronic long-term issues related to COVID are in a much worse place than I have. Basically a chronic cough that hasn't gone away since I had it in May. And it's annoying, and God forbid that it's any worse than that. It's not pleasant. But there are people that are dealing with debilitating fatigue, that are dealing with all sorts of other horrible long-term side effects, who are technically recovered from COVID, but are now legitimately disabled. I think we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of this for a substantial length of time. If I could go back to I think the core question that we're grappling with on this call, if we assume that COVID is serious, and we assume that we don't want people to get it, and we assume that it is dangerous for portions of the population, particularly older people or people that have other associated comorbidities, if those are correct, the question is, how do we allow large groups of children together who will have it? Kids will have it and be asymptomatic. They'll be passing it back and forth. It will be just like the flu or the cold, except, and this is where I likely very much agree with Kim, except that in most cases it'll be even less than a cold or the flu because it's in kids. Like, they're just not experiencing symptoms the same way that adults do. But is that acceptable, and can we do it in a way that means they aren't taking it home to their grandparents, that they aren't taking it home, that they aren't giving it to teachers who might be a little bit older, that we aren't, how do we do this? And I think this is the fundamental question that most of the school administrators are grappling with. At what point can we bring kids back safely that does not greatly risk other populations? And when we see the data coming down as opposed to going up, and we see the steps that are being taken in highly controlled environments. So I know, Beth, you were mentioning private schools where there are a lot of, much better control about what's happening and how to engage, that you're starting to see protocols put in place. I think it's a worthy conversation to have. When do we see that happening with the public schools? And we already are in some other public schools.
That's the thing. I think when you start seeing that there are other schools doing it, not only here in Georgia, but I have friends all over the country, and their kids are going back to school. So they're figuring it out. I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is like whatever, it's no big deal. I get that this is hard. I think one thing to consider is that there will be a significant amount of people that choose to stay virtual, which will alleviate the numbers greatly for those who do want to go back. And I know of some school districts where once you choose virtual, you cannot come back for a certain period of time because of how they are working the logistics. So, I guess safe, and I'm saying that in quotes, air quotes, because what is your definition of safe may be different than my definition than somebody else's. I don't think anybody should die. And so don't ever put that on us that we are saying it's acceptable for people to die.
Well, but that's what you mean with herd immunity, though. herd immunity is going to involve people
Going to
dying.
require a certain number of
Yeah,
people
I
to
mean,
die.
you can either.
Well, what's the answer? Are you
Yeah,
just?
I mean, what are we supposed to do? Just stay home?
Well,
I
I
mean,
think the answer is that there is no one straightforward answer because it's a complicated
So
problem.
don't attack that we have maybe a different opinion, right?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying you can't say in one breath that you shouldn't say we don't care, and then you can't also say
that we are heartless and not compassionate because we want
no. I don't think you understand the implications of what.
racist because we want our kids to go back to school.
I don't think you understand how that comes across to other people, and particularly, I'm reading through a whole long chat log here. And I'm sparing you the most angry comments because I'm trying to get polite.
I can take them.
Well,
I'd
rather not. You know what I'm trying.
If I could, let me say it this way. Right? So I am generally sympathetic to wanting kids to go back to school, right? As long as we can do it in a way that the broad community feels is safe. And I recognize that people are going to have different opinions about what that particularly means.
What does that mean to you?
Well, the top
hold on. Let me
doctor
kind
in
of
the
get this off
United
my
States
chest.
can't
Let me
get
get
it
this
right.
off my chest, right? So we don't have a definition of what constitutes generally accepted as safe. Like that's part of the problem. But what if we're fundamentally arguing, as we did earlier, about the base facts of what this means in terms of morbidity, we've got a problem. If instead we're having a conversation around where are we comfortable making sacrifice for the better good, that's a worthwhile conversation for us to be able to have. Herd immunity is not really on the table because it truly is just a giant number of deaths necessary to get there.
And that was kind of the point
if we're capable of having kids in school in a way that doesn't risk the lives of people who are at risk, or that only minimally has any kind of issue associated with that, then I think we ought to be exploring that. And I think
other school systems already are, and they're doing it successfully.
We're very new in that. I mean, so people being frustrated about this is okay. 8 weeks ago, Georgia was not in a place where schools could open safely. Our numbers have come down substantially since then, and I think a lot of school administrators are looking at where our numbers are now and saying, let's try some things. And when we say, so hold on, let me finish this point. So when we say that other people are being safe about it right now and they've figured it out, that's not necessarily true. I think other people are trying, and we've got a 2 week to 3 week lag before we have level of comfort that they actually have figured it out. But I absolutely.
What are your thoughts on thousands and thousands and thousands of people protesting in Washington, D.C., protesting here last weekend? What are your thoughts on that, on events like that being able to happen, but we can't send our children back to school in a controlled environment where social distancing is taking place, safety measures are being taken place? I'm literally looking at.
Are you asking me whether I think that somebody that is out protesting in favor of Black lives means that I can't?
I didn't say anything about Black lives.
But
I'm saying
thousands of just general protests for what? I'm sorry, because I'm not familiar with protests that are happening around the country that aren't Black lives. What protest? Like, so the Sturgis motorcycle rally. Let's talk about a giant.
Let's talk about that.
Right.
Yeah, about the inflated 250,000 case number that supposedly.
Yeah, I don't believe that number either. I think that's an inflated number, but it's not 10. Right. And so like, look, large groups of people getting together that probably shouldn't be getting together. Yeah. Like, would you want me to say, no, that's a bad, like, that's a good idea?
It's just funny to me that the national news can put that on the air with a straight face and talk about the importance of their voices being heard. And then in the same breath, talk about this deadly virus that we cannot even send our children to school.
I mean, I think the difference for me there, Kim, is that people who are protesting have a choice. That's an autonomous decision. They're adults. If they want, if I want to go out to a protest and roll the dice, I can.
But how many people are they putting at risk?
At,
How many
what
people
we're
are there?
talking about is not a choice. Like at school, you open schools, and people are going to be affected by that, whether they want to be
So
or
let's
not.
go be violent in the street. Let's go do that. But we can't let our children
Kim,
school.
my God, look, I want kids to be back in school. I want to support what you're saying. I want to agree with you. My God, you're making it so hard.
Yeah, I have to agree with Hans
I
on this.
mean,
Like you're throwing a
come
lot
on.
of.
I don't need you to agree with me. at
Well, you
all.
kind of do.
Yeah,
you do.
That's the problem.
Like,
You kind of
I
do
mean-
if you want people to accept your argument.
Are you
I
wanting
mean,
your kids to go to school,
Well,
or
I know
are
a
you wanting to
whole lot
stop
of other
Black
people
Lives
who
Matter? Like, give me a
believe just
break
like I
here.
do. So, I mean, your argument isn't superior over mine. I'm sorry, it's not. I'll stand by.
I mean, the more you talk,
it's
the more
hypocritical.
your evidence that you're presenting actually.
Well, the
gives
more you
everyone
talk,
else
I
that
could
clear-
say the same about you.
Kim,
I mean,
I'm gonna
welcome
be,
that.
I'm gonna
think
be
your
real.
data is ridiculous and flawed. So,
I'm gonna be real polite about it. You said some things that, frankly, I wouldn't allow in my comments because I don't allow people to totally misinform my readers. I've been extremely patient with some of the things that you've said, and I'm trying to find common ground. But you're going full Fox News on us here, and I can't deal. I just
Dan
can't.
is her jam.
Well,
Dan.
I can't
It's
deal
her
with it.
jam.
CNN. So what is that?
I
mean,
can't deal. If
So,
you're
hold
gonna,
on, I wanna hear-
if you
can I
wanna,
hear
you
if
from
really
Beth?
have an
if-
agenda.
if you
Beth
wanna-
was
really have a
making
political
point.
agenda.
I would be interested.
if
in
I had a
hearing
political
Beth's
agenda,
point.
I wouldn't have invited you on, Kim.
I would be interested.
I think
in
you
Beth's
invited us
point.
on to attack us. To be
No,
honest,
I'm trying to agree
No.
with you on the points
we're trying
that
to
I
find
agree
common
with.
ground, but you're
Hey,
going
Dan,
off
can we
into.
hear- Dan, can we hear from Beth real quick? She was trying to make a point.
Yeah.
And I do want to hear what she was saying.
What I was saying is, I don't know if, I think, Dan, you've listened, but I don't know, Hans, if you heard some of the comments from Dr. Morley from the Board of Education from the July meeting, where she made this very political. And I'll tell you that is what put me over the edge. She made this argument about our kids going back to school political. And this should not be political. There is nothing political about kids going back to school. But what is happening is this whole COVID thing has become extremely political, and it has trickled down to whether people believe kids should be back in school or not. People are taking sides on everything, okay? Clearly, we all have different opinions on certain things. We agree on some things, we disagree. No longer can people disagree without it being attached to something else. We are all human beings entitled to our own opinions, our own perspectives. I've been in medical sales my entire career. Let me tell you that data can be sliced and diced and interpreted in so many different ways. So how one person interprets data may be very different from how somebody else draws conclusions from data. But what's frustrating now is that all of this is at the expense of our children. So as we as adults are caught up in defending why we're right or why somebody else is wrong, our kids are suffering. So at the end of the day, I don't care who you want to vote for. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care if you watch Fox News or CNN. We need an option to move our lives forward in a safe way that gives people who are comfortable going to school the option to go to school. Those who are not comfortable going to school, an equally acceptable option to continue virtually. That is at the bottom, at the very core of why I started this group and why I feel so passionate about what we're doing. We have gone off on all of these different tangents, which that's okay. It's part of the big picture of the argument. But if we go back to the very core, all we are saying is we want an option, not have to go to school. Everybody has to go to school. That is not what we're saying. We want an option for those who want to go to school and those teachers who want to be back in school to have that option. That's it.
I want you to be successful. I do want you to be successful.
I want my
'Cause
kid
I
in
think
school
this is
too,
an
man.
important
I mean-
conversation to be having right now, without doubt. And I think it's great for us to be having this debate as a community right now. Like, this is, your advocacy is the same as any other advocacy where you're bringing something forward and trying to get a critical mass of people to support it, right? What I am telling you is that the strength of your argument lies in the harm that it does do to kids and in the disproportionate harm it does to some kids. And to the extent that we can have a conversation around how we can mitigate that safely, I think you have a really powerful conversation that we can be having.
Yep.
I am also at the same time saying that the way to get there and be successful is not to bring into question facts about COVID, because it is actually quite dangerous and it scares the hell out of people, and it should. And so the conversation to have with the public should not be starting from a point where you're questioning COVID data. It should be from a point where Georgia data looks a particular way. We're starting to see some successes in areas around here with these options put forward. And we think with these particular steps, these specific particular steps, DeKalb can move forward also in a way that is quite safe. Because if you are questioning the underlying data, it makes me immediately believe you don't give a shit about safe. And I don't think that's true from where you're coming from. And so I want you all to be successful.
So I want to touch on this because I mentioned out. So Marshall Orson is a member of the school board. I asked him to come on to this show. He said he didn't want to step into it just yet, but I did ask him some questions via Facebook Messenger. And I said, Marshall, what is the threshold that has to be met before any in-person learning can resume? And he said, we will know Monday. That's going to be the school board meeting, which I think everyone in this room that has a kid in DeKalb County Schools is going to watch, and we're going to cover it. He said, I think there are CDC guidelines on community spread, 5% positivity rate, I think, being one of the factors to be in the low to moderate range. However, though it always was that the DeKalb rate is down, we just finished Labor Day weekend, and it will be telling where we stand in 2 weeks. And I cannot help but compare that to Boston's 1.35% positivity rate. Not sure about Boston, but I did want to share that just to kind of give you.
What is our positivity rate?
I should have looked that up. I don't know off the top of my head what the positivity.
As a country, it's 8%.
No, but Georgia's doing better than we were 8 weeks ago, and so it would be good to know where actually, I mean, just so that we're all talking from the same basis, what we really want to know is DeKalb's specific positivity rate. And so if we don't have that answer in front of us, that should absolutely be a question in front of the superintendent at DeKalb County Schools.
And one thing I think is challenging for them is that we are the third largest county. We're the third largest school system or district. So being so big, how are they going to make decisions? Is it a sweeping decision for the entire county? Are they looking where there are certain areas that may be higher or lower? Because in the beginning, when they first made the announcement about virtual school, they did comment that they would be looking at different areas, right, to see fit. So one of my big questions is, are you going to treat DeKalb County in its entirety as the big county that it is, or will you be looking at certain areas to see what makes sense based on certain areas? And I think that's really hard. That's hard thing.
For DeKalb. I mean, DeKalb is. I mean, we had to remember, and this is no disrespect meant to my friends that work at the school system, but I think even they would agree that DeKalb's got problems, and they've had structural problems for a long time, and it may be just from their point of view easier to do it the way that they're doing it than trying to go in and develop plans at an individual community level that they ain't going to execute well.
I do have data on DeKalb's positivity rate. I do have that data. So the 7-day average of positive case results are 4.8%. So that's below the World Health Organization's recommended guideline of 5% for containment. Additionally, our cases per 100,000 over 14 days has decreased from 134 on Sunday to 127 as of today. That's another 5% drop in just the past 2 days.
Good numbers. I mean,
So
without
so
question,
Zoe
those are great
Sealer
numbers.
has been jumping in with some fact checks. I appreciate her. She said Georgia positivity rate is 9.5% as of August 9. I don't know where she's getting that.
But we're talking about DeKalb.
All right, we're talking about DeKalb. And you said
Yeah.
DeKalb's was 5?
4.8.
4.9.
4.9. Okay.
So
Those are good numbers. I mean, without question, those are good numbers. I'm curious if you guys have just a reaction to this. One of the things that I was wondering if the schools could do, because I have 4 kids. My 2 oldest, I would not say they thrive in a virtual environment. It's a pain in the ass for them, but they do fine in a virtual environment. I don't feel like they're falling behind and are going to have trouble. My 3rd daughter has special needs and simply cannot be on a screen. Just it's ineffective. It's worse than ineffective. It actually is regressive. I'm wondering if there's a path for special needs kids or a way to get kids that just fundamentally need the structure of school into the classes.
And
I
want to point out that is a question we just got from a reader as well. So Rob, we hear you, and we're asking that question right now. I'm sorry.
I truly think they should be some of the first kids getting back to school. I mean, I think they should be the top priority. I have a good friend with a daughter who's autistic, and this has been her worst nightmare, honestly. And so I 100% feel that those kids should be prioritized back in school before any other kids. This is hurting them probably the most. It's really sad. Really
Yeah,
sad.
and I know other people who have special needs. Thankfully, we are not in that boat. So we are, as our family, would be totally fine if DeKalb County Schools came out and said, hey, we're going to get the special needs kids back in first. They have the most acute need. We need to deal with that first. And I think that's fair and that's good. And I think that I think everybody's on the same page there.
Here's one thing I want to say. At the end of the day, I know, and a lot of other people I know, like, our kids are going to be just fine if we don't go back to school. And I could throw in the towel on this and on advocating for this, knowing that my kids would be just fine. But this isn't just about my kids. This is about all of these other kids who are not going to be fine. Who's advocating for them? Who's pushing for options for those kids to be back in school?
Well, I definitely think that there's thought being given to that at the county level. I do. Now, I definitely think that they are facing some unique challenges that a lot of metro school districts face. Organizational challenges, funding challenges, things that are not new either. They've been there for a long time. So I definitely, I feel strongly that this school board is probably one of the better ones that we've had since I've been following it, and I've been covering DeKalb County Schools for 10 years. I know that's a low bar because we had a superintendent that went to prison once, but I mean, I think in the scheme of things, the school board we have is a pretty good and thoughtful group when they're not getting us sued for stupid reasons.
You nailed it, though. You said, that, oh my God, what was I going to say? You said that there were problems in DeKalb. DeKalb has had so many issues. And I think people went about their business, and wherever they were going to school, it was more about their principal or maybe the superintendent. But, I mean, me personally, I never got involved paid attention to the local politics. And I'm like, hello, this is what you should be paying attention to, because this is what directly impacts your family. So I think this has been a big wake-up call for a lot of people to say, I better start paying attention. I've never been involved in something like this. My husband was part of Brookhaven becoming its own city. He's the one. I have never gotten involved in stuff like this. But because I feel so passionate about it, I decided to take action, because we can all sit around and complain and rip on the board members or, have issues about this and that. But if you're not doing anything about it, then what's the point?
And I think that's wonderful. And that honestly, I've been preaching that for years. Get involved. I'm sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
no. I was just going to say a lot of these board members run unopposed. And I mean, I'm like you guys, I will admit, like, maybe it's taking something like this for us all to kind of plug in and be like, hey, you know what? If we don't like what we're getting, then let's do something to change it. But if these people don't have any opposition, maybe that's motivation for, some of.
Well, and I mean, I would, speaking as someone dealing with commissioners and board members, I would actually suspect that every single board member that is there wants to see more activism on the parts of the individuals in the community, wants to hear more from the community, wants
We're definitely hearing from
that
us.
kind of feedback. Yeah, like it's whether they're doing a good job or not. And to Dan's point, I do think they're doing a better job than we've seen historically. There are 3 constituencies that has to be served here, right? You've got to obviously help the kids. You've got to, and the parents, right? Kids and parents. But it doesn't do any good if all of the kids are ready and all of the parents are ready to go back to the school if absolutely none of your teachers are ready to do that. And so you have to get the teachers there as well. And then the 3rd constituency is everyone else that is potentially harmed in the county by this decision if it's not done in a safe way. They have to also think about those individuals. And so, to George's point at the very beginning, it's hard to balance that equation. I'm encouraged by the numbers that Kim just shared because it means that we might be at a place where we could. It also comes down to execution, and do we do it safely? Like, we're all talking about doing it safely, but then we actually have to do it safely. But I think y'all's time you're well timed. It's time to have this conversation. We should be having this conversation.
Yeah, and I want to close because we are way over time. It's been a good discussion. I appreciate all the viewpoints. I will close with one thought. When I was talking to my son's teacher, I said, if they ask you to go into school, will you go? And she said yes. And I said, do you want to go back into school? And she said no, but they don't care about what I think. And I want to tell our teachers, and my son's teacher in particular, that I do care about what you think. And your life and perspective does matter to me. And that I hope whatever conversation that we have about this going forward involves every stakeholder who's going to be affected by this. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to thank you all for joining us. Twitch Show is going to be back on Friday. We're going to do some more music on Friday. I'm still working out the details on that, but should be a lot of fun, singer-songwriter stuff. Grab a beer, come join us. We'll be Friday at 6. Thank you all for joining us for this conversation today. I hope you all have a great evening, and we're going to see you on Friday. Thanks, everybody.